Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The world trembled the day the Void Blade was unleashed. It began as a normal afternoon in the magical academy, where the air thrummed with the hum of arcane energy. Scholars and students milled about, too absorbed in their studies to sense the looming disaster. In one of the deepest chambers, far below the surface, a group of powerful sorcerers stood around a glowing circle etched into the stone floor. They were attempting a forbidden experiment, one that would allow them to harness the power of the void, an elemental force of pure chaos. The Void Blade, the centerpiece of their ambition, was a weapon of legend, whispered about in fearful tones throughout history. The lead sorcerer, a man named Malak, gestured for his colleagues to continue the incantation. The air in the room grew thick, buzzing with volatile energy. Suddenly, a crack split through the circle's center, and a blinding light erupted from the stone. The sorcerers stumbled back as a deep rumbling sound, like the growl of a sleeping giant, filled the chamber. The Void Blade rose slowly from the crack, hovering above the broken circle. It shimmered with an unnatural, shifting darkness, its sharp edges reflecting nothing but void. Then, chaos erupted. A blast of dark energy radiated from the Void Blade, rippling through the magical academy and spreading across the land. Magical barriers shattered. The sorcerers who had been closest to the experiment were instantly vaporized, their bodies turned to dust in a heartbeat. The survivors, those unlucky enough to witness the catastrophe, could only watch in horror as the world outside began to unravel. Across vast kingdoms, the ground cracked open, and the sky twisted into unnatural shapes. Entire cities vanished into the darkness, swallowed whole by the void's energy. People screamed, fled, and fought to survive as their reality was torn apart, but it was futile. The void spared no one. Far away, in the quiet countryside, a man named Arthur felt the tremor in the air. He was no sorcerer, but the pulse of magic reached him even here, tugging at something deep inside him. Arthur was a warrior by trade, known throughout the land as a master of every weapon he touched. But he carried the weight of failure in his heart, haunted by the battles he could not win, by the comrades he could not save. Still, when the ground beneath his feet shook, he knew something far worse than war was coming. Arthur gathered his gear without hesitation, mounting his horse and riding toward the source of the disturbance. He knew instinctively that the balance of the world had shifted, and he could feel the pull of destiny leading him forward. The Void Blade, whether he wanted it or not, was calling to him. Days passed as Arthur rode through devastated towns and villages. The landscape had become unrecognizable. What was once fertile land now resembled a wasteland of jagged rocks and twisted trees. Along the way, he encountered survivors, men and women who had lost everything. They told stories of madness, of the sky cracking open and strange creatures emerging from the dark rifts. Some begged him for protection, but Arthur could not linger. He knew that time was running out. In the ruins of a town once known for its grand markets, Arthur met Allure, a rogue mage with a sharp wit and a haunted past. She had been studying the Void Blade for years, searching for ways to contain or destroy it. Now, seeing the weapon unleashed upon the world, she sought out Arthur, recognizing that he was the only one who might have the strength to wield it. "You're the one," she said, her voice low and urgent as they stood amid the wreckage of the town square. "The blade has chosen you. Whether you want it or not, it's bound to you now." Arthur frowned, staring at her with suspicion. "I'm no sorcerer. What could I possibly do with a weapon like that?" Allure smirked. "It's not about what you can do, it's about what the blade wants. And right now, it wants you. But if you think you can just walk away, you're a fool. The void is spreading, and if someone doesn't control it, the entire world will be consumed." Arthur said nothing for a moment, his eyes scanning the destruction around them. He had seen enough death to know the truth in her words. The pull of the void was strong, almost irresistible. He could feel it in his bones. Reluctantly, he agreed to let Allure guide him, and together, they set off toward the heart of the chaos, the magical city where the void blade had been unleashed. Along the way, they were joined by Thorn, a hardened warrior who had lost everything in the chaos and now fought only for himself. He was skeptical of Arthur's mission but figured there was nothing left to lose by tagging along. The journey to the city was long and perilous. As they traveled deeper into the regions affected by the void, they encountered strange and terrifying creatures, warped monstrosities that defied the laws of nature. Arthur fought them off with his unmatched skill, but with each battle, he could feel the blade's pull growing stronger, tugging at the edges of his mind. When they finally reached the magical city, it was in ruins. The once great towers had crumbled, and the streets were filled with rubble. The few survivors they encountered were either mad or dangerously corrupted by the void's influence. At the heart of the city, Arthur saw it, the void blade, floating above the ground, pulsating with dark energy. Arthur approached the weapon slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel its power radiating toward him, like a wave crashing against the shore. His hand trembled as he reached out and gripped the hilt of the blade. The moment his fingers touched the metal, a surge of energy coursed through him, filling him with unimaginable power. He staggered backward, gasping for breath. The world around him seemed to warp and shift, and for a moment, he thought he was losing his grip on reality. But as he steadied himself, the power of the void blade settled within him, and he felt a strange sense of clarity. The blade had chosen him, but it came with a price. Arthur could feel the blade's dark whispers in the back of his mind, urging him to give in, to use its power to reshape the world. Visions of conquest and domination flashed before his eyes, tempting him with promises of ultimate control. He saw himself standing atop a throne, ruling over a world remade in his image, free from the chaos and suffering that had plagued it for so long. But deep down, Arthur knew that path led to ruin. "I can't do this," he muttered, shaking his head. "This power, it's too much." Allure stepped forward, her expression grim. "You're the only one who can control it, Arthur. If you let the blade fall into the wrong hands, it will destroy everything. You have to be stronger than it." Arthur clenched his fists, fighting back the dark urges swirling inside him. He knew Allure was right, but the weight of the responsibility felt unbearable. The void blade was more than just a weapon, it was a force of nature, capable of either saving or destroying the world. The group spent days in the ruins of the magical city, searching for answers. Allure delved into ancient texts, trying to find a way to destroy the blade, while Thorn kept a wary eye on Arthur, ready to intervene if the warrior lost control. As the days passed, the void continued to spread, consuming more of the world. Arthur could feel the pressure building inside him, the blade's power growing stronger with each passing hour. He had to make a choice soon, or the world would be lost. Allure eventually found what they had been searching for, a way to end the void's reign of terror. But the solution was far from simple. The only way to destroy the void blade was to take it into the heart of the void itself, a place where reality twisted and nothing made sense. It was a journey that would test them all to their limits, and even if they succeeded, there was no guarantee they would make it out alive. Arthur stared at the ancient map Allure had uncovered, his brow furrowed. "So we just walk into the void and hope for the best?" he asked, his voice heavy with doubt. Allure nodded. "It's the only way. If you don't do this, there won't be a world left to save." Arthur sighed, running a hand through his hair. He had faced countless battles in his life, but this felt different. This wasn't just about survival, it was about the fate of the world. He couldn't afford to fail. With a grim sense of determination, Arthur tightened his grip on the void blade and turned to face his companions. "Let's end this." Arthur gripped the void blade tightly, his knuckles white against the dark metal. The weapon hummed in his hand, its power thrumming through him like a pulse. He felt it, the overwhelming energy of the void, the temptation to use it, to end everything in one sweep. But Arthur fought against that pull with all his might. His purpose was clear, even if the path ahead was filled with danger and uncertainty. Elara led the way as they departed the ruins of the magical city. The landscape around them had shifted drastically since their arrival. The further they traveled toward the heart of the void, the more reality itself began to warp. The ground cracked and splintered beneath their feet, and the sky above swirled in unnatural hues, as if the fabric of existence was fraying at the seams. Thorn kept a steady pace behind them, his eyes ever watchful for threats. Though the world had become twisted and unpredictable, it wasn't just the physical dangers that worried him. He glanced at Arthur occasionally, noting the strain in the warrior's posture. The blade was taking its toll. Thorn could see it in the dark circles under Arthur's eyes, the way his grip on the weapon never seemed to relax. As they moved deeper into the void's reach, the monsters that had plagued the world since the blade's release became more frequent, and more terrifying. Creatures born of chaos, their forms impossible to comprehend, lashed out at the group from the shadows. Arthur wielded the void blade with deadly precision, cutting through their warped bodies with swift strokes. But each battle left him more drained, more vulnerable to the blade's insidious whispers. They pressed on, driven by the knowledge that the world's survival hinged on their success. Elara remained focused, her sharp mind racing to decipher the mysteries of the void. The ancient texts she carried offered some guidance, but even she couldn't predict what lay ahead. Every step felt like a gamble. The path eventually led them to the edge of the void itself. Before them stretched a chasm of swirling darkness, a vortex of energy so intense that it distorted everything around it. It was a place where time had no meaning, where reality bent and shifted like a living thing. Arthur could feel the pull of the void blade growing stronger as they approached, the weapon vibrating in his hand as if eager to merge with the chaotic energy that surrounded them. "This is it," Elara said quietly, her voice tinged with both awe and fear. "Beyond this point, there's no turning back." Arthur nodded, his jaw clenched. He had known this moment was coming, but that didn't make it any easier to face. The void's energy pressed against him from all sides, threatening to overwhelm him. But he held on to his purpose. The thought of what would happen if he failed. Without another word, Arthur stepped forward and plunged into the heart of the void. The sensation was immediate and disorienting. It was as if the world had dissolved around him, leaving only endless darkness. The air was thick, heavy with the weight of the unknown. Arthur's senses were bombarded by the chaotic energy that surrounded him. The void blade flared in his hand, its power intensifying, feeding off the void itself. Elara and Thorn followed close behind, their forms barely visible in the swirling shadows. Elara's magic flickered weakly in the oppressive atmosphere, but it was enough to keep them grounded. Thorn moved silently, his instincts guiding him as they pushed further into the abyss. The deeper they went, the more distorted reality became. Time seemed to stretch and contract at random, moments slipping away before Arthur could grasp them. The whispers of the void grew louder in his mind, promising him power, control, everything he had ever wanted. But Arthur knew better than to trust those voices. He had seen what the blade's power could do, and he would not let it consume him. At the center of the void, they found it, the entity. It was not a creature in the traditional sense, but a manifestation of pure chaos, a swirling mass of energy and darkness that seemed to pulse with malevolent intent. It loomed before them, towering over the shattered remains of reality. Its presence was suffocating, and Arthur could feel the void blade vibrating violently in his hand, as if eager to join with the entity and unleash its full power. "You've come far," the entity's voice echoed through the void, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to reverberate through Arthur's bones. "But you are not strong enough to defeat me." Arthur stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. "I'm not here to defeat you," he said, his voice steady. "I'm here to end this." The entity laughed, a sound that sent chills down Arthur's spine. "You think you can stop me? You are nothing without the blade. And with it, you are mine." Arthur's grip tightened on the hilt of the void blade. The power surged through him, but he fought to keep it under control. "I won't let you take this world." The entity shifted, its form twisting and expanding as it drew closer. "You already have, warrior. You've let the blade into your heart, and now you are one with the void. There is no escape." Arthur gritted his teeth, fighting against the overwhelming force pressing down on him. He could feel the void blade's power thrumming through his veins, the temptation to give in growing stronger with every passing moment. But he had come too far to fall now. In the chaos around them, Elara and Thorn battled to keep the entity's minions at bay, warped figures that had once been human, now twisted into grotesque shapes by the void's influence. But Arthur knew that this final confrontation was his alone to face. The entity surged forward, its energy crackling through the air. Arthur braced himself, raising the void blade as the chaotic force slammed into him. The impact nearly knocked him off his feet, but he held firm, channeling the blade's power to push back against the onslaught. The force of the collision sent shockwaves rippling through the void, distorting the very fabric of reality. For a moment, it seemed like the entity would overwhelm him, its darkness pressing in from all sides. But then, in a flash of clarity, Arthur understood what had to be done. The void blade wasn't just a weapon, it was a key. A key that could lock the void away, sealing its power for good. But to do so, he would have to become one with it. Arthur closed his eyes, letting the truth of his fate settle over him. He could feel the blade's power pulling him deeper into the void, offering him a way out, a way to rule. But he refused. Instead, he focused on what mattered, on the people he had fought for, on the world he had sworn to protect. With a final, resolute breath, Arthur drove the void blade deep into the heart of the entity. The reaction was immediate and violent. The entity screamed, its form writhing and twisting as the blade's power surged through it, ripping apart the chaos that had held it together. The darkness around them began to collapse, folding in on itself as the void was sealed. Arthur felt the pull of the blade intensify, dragging him into the void it was creating. But he didn't resist. He had known this would be the cost. As the world around him disintegrated, Arthur allowed himself to let go. The last thing he felt was a sense of peace, knowing that the world would survive. The aftermath of Arthur's sacrifice was felt across the land. The sky, once torn apart by the void's influence, began to clear, and the fractured earth slowly began to heal. The twisted creatures that had roamed the land vanished, their connection to the void severed forever. Elara and Thorn stood in silence at the edge of the chasm where Arthur had disappeared. The world was saved, but the cost had been great. Arthur's name would live on in legend, a testament to human strength and selflessness. In the years that followed, the tale of Arthur and the void blade became the stuff of myth, told around campfires and in grand halls alike. Statues were erected in his honor, and his story was passed down through generations as a reminder of the power of sacrifice, of the choices that shaped the fate of the world. But for Elara and Thorn, the memory of Arthur's final stand was far more personal. They had seen the man behind the legend, the warrior who had fought not for glory, but for the simple belief that one life could make a difference, and in the end, Arthur had proven that it could.